Right. Honorable members of the committee, good morning. Nice to see everyone. I see a quorum. I must inform members that the clerk of the committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor can they participate in debate. We can now proceed to the election of the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 106-2, the chair must be a member of the government party. I am ready to receive motions. Mr. Lauzon.
Merci, Monsieur le Greffier.
Thank you very much, Clerk. I would like to introduce our new member, Mr. Montiel, who will be a member of this committee. And I would also like to suggest him as chair for the committee.
It's been moved by Monsieur Lauzon that Mr. Longfield be elected as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Mr. Lobb?
Thank you very much. Just as a longstanding principle that I've had, I have the utmost respect for Mr. Longfield, don't get me wrong, and his riding in Guelph is very close to my riding, so there's no issue with Mr. Longfield as a chair, and when he's elected chair, or if he's elected chair, I'm sure he'll do a fantastic job. But I've always believed that the person should be nominated from the committee that they already sit on, which is this committee. And I would just ask if Ms. Diab would like to have her name stand forward as the chair of the committee. And because nothing against Mr. Longfield, but Ms. Diab's been a longstanding member of this committee and has shown herself to be very good and qualified. And if she would let her name stand, I would move her as our candidate.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lobb.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the confidence that you're showing in me.
Having me. Perhaps next time. I think for today, I'm very happy and excited to have MP Longfield chair of the committee.
All right, so the motion has been moved by Mr. Lauzon that Mr. Longfield be elected chair of the committee. One more time, are there any further motions? All right, so the question is on the motion. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? Yes. The motion is carried and Mr. Longfield is elected chair.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you to the members for your vote of confidence, and thanks to Mr. Lobb for testing the waters. It's always good to have a democratic process in these types of things, and I'm looking forward to serving as your chair. Of course, filling in for some pretty big shoes with Kirsty Duncan having stepped down for health reasons, and thank you to Mr. Talker for all of the good work that you've done in keeping the meetings going on time, and I've been reading the testimonies and the questions. It looks like an excellent committee with great questions going around the table. I look forward to hearing more of those today. But for now, I'm just going to suspend it for a couple of seconds. We've got a second witness that just has showed up, and we'll be doing some sound checks. So just give us a second or two. continue our study on the support for commercialization of intellectual property. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and for the members here. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on your microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you do have a choice at the bottom of your screen for either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And for members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. On Zoom, please use the raise hand function, and we'll be watching for that. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. So in accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. So now I'd like to welcome our first witness. We have two witnesses this morning that we'll be hearing from Alain Frank, the Director of Innovation and Technology for the Conference Board of Canada, and for Andrew Greer, the Managing Director of Purple. We'll start off with Alain Frank for 5 minutes. Alain, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to your study. I'm Alan Frank, Director of Innovation and Technology at the Conference Board of Canada. And happy World Intellectual Property Day, by the way, which is celebrated around the world tomorrow. So very serendipitous. I think we can all now agree that intellectual property is a critical asset and a driver of the innovation economy. It's important at the firm level. IP-backed companies are 1.6 times more likely to experience high growth, 3 times more likely to expand domestically, and 4.3 times more likely to expand internationally. Innovation and IP are also important for countries, regions, and communities. So those with strong innovation activity and ability to commercialize their IP see improvements in productivity, economic growth, and job creation. Canada currently ranks 15th in the Global Innovation Index among 132 countries. We are considered global leaders in innovation on several measures, but we struggle to turn these advantages into commercial success and economic growth. Indeed, Canada faces considerable growth and productivity challenges. As we've heard from the OECD, Canada's real per capita GDP growth between 2007 and 2020 was less than 1%, and the country stands dead last among OECD countries in per capita growth all the way to 2060. This weak economic growth will cost Canada more than $500 billion in lost economic potential, dollars that could be invested in innovation, healthcare, human capital, or even growing the green economy. So to address this challenge, we need real-time measurement and analysis of our shortcomings and evidence-based recommendations to improve our performance. We at the Conference Board actually capture our performance annually through our How Canada Performs series and our National Innovation Report Card, which I have the most recent data in front of me here. And unfortunately, I must report that for 2022, Canada scores a C overall once again. So we continue to score relatively well in public R&D with a grade of B, and relatively strong in entrepreneurial ambition with a grade of A. But we continue to lag significantly behind other OECD comparator nations, scoring a D in business expenditures and R&D, a D in labor productivity, and a D in intellectual property. So this confirms the innovation paradox is still alive and well here in Canada. So to get to the root of this problem, we recently partnered with Mars Discovery District and 12 founding members to launch the Canadian Centre for the Innovation Economy. In the same way that we've heard and seen an asset collective approach for IP education support, we have built a research collective approach to provide analysis and insight to tackle the problem of our poor innovation performance. The research agenda of the Conference Board's Centre for Innovation is the role and impact of post-secondary research, commercialization, and entrepreneurship on regional economies, corporate R&D innovation capability and technology adoption, Talent 4.0, which is developing the future skills workforce, and ultimately government innovation policy and funding program performance. And the first project out of the center is on intellectual property and where Canada can punch above its weight and win globally through comparative advantage. I do have some preliminary results here, which I can prepare or share during the Q&A. But we have 5 recommendations based on several research and experience papers that we've done here. And they are: continue to strengthen investments in existing programs that provide IP education, access to IP intelligence, experts, enable freedom to operate, and incentivize patent, trademark, and industrial design filings in a very systematic way. So the National IP Strategy, Explore IP, Elevate IP, IP Assist, and the Innovation Asset Collective are good starts. But we could do more. Number 2, innovation funding programs for business, such as the Innovation Clusters, SIF, IRAP, the new Canadian Innovation Corporation, and SHRED, should increase the requirements and measurement of IP asset collection as an outcome. And any financial support should trace IP origin, assignment, and ownership. 3, we should review IP rights ownership policies and technology transfer models for universities and colleges and research labs. The federal coordination and consistent provincial implementation will clarify the best models for researchers and industrial partners. We need to prioritize fields where technology has an absolute comparative advantage. Number 4, and we need to collect and share systematic data on whether and how these research projects and business incentives generate IP. Without data or measurement, we won't have the information to make evidence-based policy decisions around IP. And in the end, you get what you measure. So I'm excited for Canada, and I think we can actually win on the global stage by improving our ability to commercialize Canadian-made intellectual property. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Right on time. And now we'll move to our second witness, Andrew Greer, for 5 minutes, please. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the honorable members. My name is Andrew, and for about 10 years, I've been focusing on supporting social entrepreneurs and impact leaders to address the root causes of systemic inequity. These people and organizations are working on some of the most complex and persistent problems in Canada: climate change, poverty and housing, mental health and addictions, colonization, racism, gender violence, food security, and more. I'm here today in hopes of bringing these organizations, people, and their value to Canadian society into your thinking as you consider Canada's approach to focus on commercialization and IP. I think this will be a bit different perspective than you've heard so far. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss. I'm joining you from the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Okanagan Syilx people in Kelowna, BC. I'm the managing director and co-founder at Purple. It stands for Purposeful People. We're a social enterprise. We help social entrepreneurs and impact leaders build sustainable enterprises that address these inequities. We do this by coaching the leaders of these organizations. We have about 25 active projects at any given time, 50 year to date so far, and we're operating in BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec. Our clients and alumni are about 70% led by women, 80% incorporated as a nonprofit, and their average size is about 1.7 million in annual revenue. Most of these are led, or many of these are led by and serving folks that are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other racialized communities. We're also a co-owner of Thrive Impact Fund. We do direct investment into social enterprise and social purpose organizations on Vancouver Island and in the BC interior. So what's a social purpose organization? It's an organization with a mission to advance social and environmental objectives. Nonprofits, of course, some private for-profits, as long as they're focused on social and environmental causes, and some hybrids like community contribution companies like Purple. They often have grants and donations, but also have significant customer revenue. They operate in 3 areas of the economy, usually: community-based nonprofits like food banks, nonprofit housing providers, sports and recreation associations, also business associations like chambers, and critical government services like hospitals and universities. The economic contribution of this sector is about 8.3% of Canada's GDP, or about $192 billion a year in annual economic impact, and it's growing. 2.4 million people are employed in this sector, which is about one in 10 workers, and about 77% of those people in the sector are women. This is as large as oil, gas, forestry, agriculture, or retail. Meanwhile, there's no minister in government. So recommendations include social purpose organizations and social enterprise. There's a large economic impact and priceless social benefit. Give SPOs and SEs a home in government so they can be included in Canadian policy, programming, budget frameworks, and committees like this. For IP, focus not just on patents. SPOs need support around contracts, licensing, and legal costs, just like SMEs. Support the leaders. They're underpaid, under-resourced, and working on really hard problems. If you're going to support entrepreneurs with things like coaching and mentorship, you also need to support SPOs and social enterprises so they can expand their contribution. For community benefit, much of the value of Canada's IP accrues to private interests and a small number of shareholders. Let's consider Canada and the Canadian people as shareholders. When the government invests money in private companies and IP is developed, consider a mechanism and conditions by which the government retains royalty, shares, or licensing, with the value accruing back to Canadians. If there's a sale, exit, or ongoing revenue, this could be used to fund ongoing investment into social innovation and SPOs. Accelerate impact investing. Developing IP requires significant investment. So when SPOs and SEs become investment ready, help them. Help investors understand the unique needs of SPOs. Both support commercialization. And measure social impact. Consider income tax revenue, employment benefit, and the value of social services to Canadians for this sector. If we do that well and communicate it well, it will be very clear why SPOs need to be considered in commercialization and IP strategy. So if you want to talk, let's connect. SPOs are uniquely positioned to build a just, regenerative economy that upholds collective well-being, equity, and the health of air, land, and water. SPOs and social enterprises need to be included in Canadian policy, program, and budget frameworks. This is a really large movement. Let's build social impact together.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Greer, for your testimony. And now we'll move to the first round with 6 minutes each, heading up with Ryan Williams. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our witnesses. I'm going to start with Mr. Greer. Mr. Greer, we know each other for a long time. When I was involved with an organization called Quinnovation, you were involved with the group on Accelerate Okanagan and a program called RevUp, and you knew your stuff, especially for rural innovation. You knew your stuff about scaling companies, and I think what you're doing is almost IP commercialization 2.0, because with social purpose organizations, or as we used to call them, social enterprises, it's really focused on big, great things that are changing the landscape of Canada, on housing and on inclusivity and all the different things you mentioned. I think the biggest number that was amazing is $192 billion of impact for Canada. Pretty amazing. So I'm going to start with some questions for you. Why is scaling IP not just patents?
Good question, Ryan, or Mr. Williams, sorry. IP is not just about patents, because much innovation can't be protected by patents, or it's the wrong play or wrong choice to just focus on patents. The patents are registered IP. Contracts and licenses, that's more like protecting unregistered IP. So for a Canadian innovator, like a tech company, for example, if you register a patent, it means you actually have to release what you're patenting. And that can be dangerous. It can also be very expensive for a global innovation. It's very, very expensive to register patents globally, and near basically a huge barrier for a tech company. And for social innovation companies or social purpose organizations, the innovation isn't necessarily patentable. It's through process innovation. Digging into sort of different ways to deepen social impact. And these things need to be protected by licensing and contracts rather than patents. They bluntly can't be patented. So SPOs and businesses of all types, to be honest, they need help around the other parts of intellectual property protection, not just patents.
So tell me a little bit about leadership development. So if we have, in my region, I have an organization. It's a not-for-profit match for the developer, and they're building homes, and they have a 5-in-5 plan to build 500 homes in 500 years. They need leadership development. So tell me a little bit about why that's important.
It comes back to the people. The people leading organizations, regardless of whether they're SMEs, tech companies, SPOs, it really comes back to the people leading. And the social sector in general doesn't have much leadership development capacity provided by the government and the provinces. So leaders in these organizations, they need help building business models. They need help building sustainability. They need help improving their operations. They need help figuring out what strategy looks like, how to measure impact. And most importantly, they need help being good leaders. It really comes back to the leadership development of of the people in charge of the organizations. We can't really do innovation without good people in charge.
And you had a great model with Accelerate Okanagan, which is entrepreneurs in residence. So you had mentors matched with businesses. Would you see the same thing here? And I also want to get into community benefit, talking about government retaining shares, royalty, or licenses with certain companies they're involved with. How does that work with the not-for-profits and social purpose organizations?
Yeah, so a couple of questions there. There's lots of ways to provide mentorship and leadership development. A model like Entrepreneurs in Residence, which are essentially experienced entrepreneurs providing some long-term coaching to leaders of SPOs and tech companies. That kind of long-term mentorship is critical. You can't really learn IP in a boot camp. You can't learn how to run a company or an organization in a boot camp or a workshop. I really think we need to invest in long-term mentorship and coaching to support these leaders help contributing to solving really hard, complex problems. Again, this stuff doesn't happen in a workshop or boot camp. And over to community benefit. There's a few different ways to think about community benefit, and I want to first say that it's not going to make sense that the government or a body that it sort of determines keeps a license, royalty, or shares of every piece of IP that comes out, but I think it's worth exploring some conditions upon which, when perhaps the size of investment justifies that the government or some entity keeps some value held by the Canadian government and controlled by the Canadian government, not at the detriment of the entrepreneur. But really, if there's an acquisition, an exit, or ongoing significant revenue, some of that benefit actually comes back to fund more intellectual property development, including social purpose organizations and a long-term social innovation strategy.
Fantastic. And last question, sir. Tell us about impact investing and why that's important.
About 30 seconds.
Thank you for the time check. Impact investing is growing globally tremendously. It's growing here in Canada tremendously. Impact investing is putting direct investment into organizations that are working to solve cultural, social, or environmental issues. There's unique needs. Patient capital is needed. In lots of cases, lower financial return on investment expectations are needed. Lots of SPOs are incorporated as nonprofits, and they just can't take equity investment, and market rate returns aren't a good expectation. So we need patient capital, we need values aligned capital, and we really need to educate and sort of bring SPOs up to sort of investment readiness and educate investors on what they need.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Greer. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. And next up is Chad Collins for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Frank, I'll start with you. I was interested in your third recommendation where you talked about the review of IP rights, policies, and transfers related to post-secondary institution policies. Can I ask you what role you believe the government should play in terms of improving that process and what support we can provide as it relates to recommendation 3 that you provided to us?
Yes, thank you. I think I'd like to say, first of all, we've actually looked at the economic impact of universities on regional economies. That was one of the projects that we had done, and we started specifically with Ontario.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you. I think we've lost your microphone, which might be the point of order we're hearing. Can we check your microphone?
Okay.
You're coming out through your device, not through your microphone.
Really?
Well, are you back?
I don't know. You tell me.
Sounds like you're back. I've got the thumbs up from the translators. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let me just start again. And specifically, it was around the role the government can play in, or the federal government can play in enabling. Perhaps it was number 3, which is the review of the IP ownership. So let me just say, maybe I'll say respond by saying we've listened to actually past witnesses, Dr. Karim from UW and Dr. Jeff Taylor from the colleges and institutes, and they commented on the differences between university and colleges. And, where colleges are closer to industry, their projects tend to be faster and the IP goes to the company, whereas universities are more curiosity-driven. They tend to focus on groundbreaking deep tech or social innovation, things that maybe companies won't take. They focus on highly qualified personnel and spin-offs. And so the problem we have, of course, is that these are competing missions. So discovery of new ideas and their dissemination to students is the mission of a university. One is creation and the other is commercialization. One is invention and one is actual innovation. So the recommendation is, if you look at the differing wide variety of IP rights or commercialization at the university, on one side of the country, we have, for example, BC, which is entirely institutional owned. On the other side, we have University of Waterloo, which is entirely creator owned. And somewhere in the middle, we have perhaps Toronto, for example, that is jointly owned. And so when you look at the economies that are performing best, and they've been cited here in Fraunhofer or perhaps even the Israeli discussion, there is a centralization and a common standardization of that IP policy. So if policy or recommendation 3 is review those rights ownership policies, the technology transfer models, the ownership of those rights within and how they get transferred into the economy. Again, we do really well at that side, but we fail at the firm level to transfer those ideas in HQP into the economy. So let me just say, it needs strong federal coordination, and I think consistent provincial implementation will clarify the best models for research and industrial partners. And again, I would say Tri-Council grants must ensure IP remains in Canada for the benefit of Canadians.
Thanks, Mr. Frank. I'm going to stick with post-secondary institutions for a minute.
Yep.
A previous IP study that occurred here in Ottawa, it was conducted in 2017, highlighted that private firms do not know what research is being performed in post-secondary institutions. And there's a bit of a lack of information about potential partnerships between the private sector and post-secondary institutions. How can the federal government help in terms of sort of being a matchmaker or providing a roadmap to funnel those private investments into post-secondary institutions to ensure that we're generating as much economic growth as possible?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll cite, of course, Explore IP, which is quite an interesting and wonderful resource for companies looking for public R&D. I should check the numbers, but I remember something of the order of 4,000 opportunities sit there. However, only maybe 400 of them, 10%, were active, and possibly even 10% of that were being actively pursued in terms of intellectual property and business. So and by the way, what they do wonderfully is map out the 35 areas of technology focus in the country. So if you're in materials, or if you're in ag, or if you're in tech or in communications, you can see where those are. So it is a helpful navigation tool. But as I just suggested, there is not a lot of engagement or pickup. So if you look at, for example, what came out of the intellectual property or expert panel intellectual property expert panel that created IPON, the Intellectual Property Office of Ontario, there's where the rubber really hits the road. You have an organization that is looking at the interface between universities and specific regions, in this case, Ontario, and they are putting in place those things from recommendation 1. So IP education, IP intelligence and experts enable freedom to operate through collectives and incentivize patent, trademark, and industrial designs in a very systematic way. So that's actually a good example within Ontario, but this is Canada, Canada, Conference Board of Canada. So we have to take a national approach as well to this, not just lead provincially.
Thanks for those answers. I think I have just over a minute left. You gave a bit of a mixed bag summary of the report card that you provided for us.
Yes.
What's the greatest gap to bridge right now in terms of either investments or policies? Can you give us the top priority where you'd see some improvement in one or more of the categories that you highlighted in your opening?
Yes. I have in front of me the report card right now. Across 9 indicators. We're increasing it to 25 indicators, by the way, this year, which is going to give a lot more granularity. And maybe to Mr. Greer's point, go beyond patents, which is just a proxy for innovation. We're going to try to go to incremental innovation, social innovation, and frankly, in the words or the book of Danny Bresnitz, we're going to look for where innovation is truly happening in the country, because we actually do have great innovation sources. But to answer your question very pointedly, I'm looking at the report card. The one that receives the most D- is business R&D, and the second one beyond that is patents and intellectual property.
Great.
And so that's where we're going to focus.
Thank you very much. La prochaine députée.
The next intervener, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, congratulations on being elected to chair the committee. I was a bit skeptical about a new member becoming chair because science and research is a very important one in Canada, and we can't just improvise, and we can't improvise in dealing with the ecosystem of a committee that works very hard on this topic. And so I give you the benefit of a doubt, and I hope that you will be able to quickly familiarize yourself with the work of the committee. And you can certainly count on me to provide any help I can to help you in the area of science and research in Canada. And Chair, I'd also like to congratulate our colleague for creating this committee. Thank him for his commitment, and I would like to thank him for that. And I hope to see him again soon. And first question then for our witnesses, for Mr. Frank. You were very eloquent, and I think the figures speak for themselves. And we're in the last position in the OECD for long-term investment, and 2007 to 20, only 1% growth in GDP, and hundreds of billions of potential losses. So that means that there will be fewer resources for social issues and quality of life. So my question for you is, in your opinion, is there any indicator with regard to economic growth, long-term and current research, scientific research in Canada?
Thank you for the question. I want to actually draw attention around the comment of where we can punch above our weight and win globally. You know, we are an applied research center, Canada's largest when it comes to this issue. And so we looked at the problem of patents, we looked at the data, and we asked several questions. And I'm going to try to give you some insight to answer where we can punch above our weight. So the first thing we did was we looked at what technology classes and which ones that Canada has really strong specialization compared to the rest of the world. So the policy relevance here is consistent, strong specialization in this technology. You know, it means that there's some sort of domestic factor that supports Canadian businesses. So we looked at that, and then we looked at where the technology classes in Canada has comparative advantage. And a number of researchers have done this, but where we have done is we've overlapped the two, so where we can see where Canada can punch above its weight. So we analyzed, and here are the results actually from that report. Our analysis of the latest patent statistics show an absolute advantage in 9 fields. The top 5 being medical technology, computer technology, measurement, pharmaceuticals, and transportation. But it's also important to assess the comparative advantages. And this was mentioned by Mr. Balsillie. You know, the idea works, the ideas economy works on the idea of absolute advantage. You know, this is what you get when you get critical mass, but also you have to have strong specializations in emerging areas. And so we have 3 areas where we have a potential to punch above our weight. One of them is microstructural and nanotechnology. And this is the basis for semiconductors, quantum and advanced materials like batteries. So we're actually strong in that area, regardless of these low OECD and declining patent numbers. We have strength here. So to give you a sense what strong specialization means, Canada patents 3 times more frequently in microstructural and nano compared to the world average, in fact, and almost twice as much in civil and environmental technology. But what's really important to note, and it was mentioned by a previous witness, Pina D'Agostino, is that different approaches are required for each.
Mr. Frank, I'm going to come back to the question, but I see you're just reading the report, but I'm going to come back to another question now. And we think that Canada is the only G7 country to have fewer researchers per capita, and we invest less in research. And Canada has not increased or indexed study scholarships in the recent years. So I think how can we explain this, which is very harmful for economic growth? And the last federal budget, zero increase for research, and you know that it's difficult to do better than your competitors when they are investing. And, for example, the U.S. doubled their funding for research, doubled. And the question I would like to ask then is, how would you evaluate our future prospects in Canada, given these facts?
So let me just qualify. Do you mean in terms of potential innovation policy compared to, for example, the U.S. or China or other leading nations?
I'm talking about productivity, economic growth. How can we innovate and grow when we don't invest relative to, for example, the Americans?
Indeed, that is a problem. Again, where we seem to have lost ability to translate, this incredible ability in public R&D, essentially the generation and creation of new ideas.
Sorry, I'm going to have to move to the next, next speaker. If we could have that answer in writing, would be beneficial.
Oui, je vais demander une réponse écrite. Merci beaucoup.
So, thank you.
That was what I was going to ask. Thank you.
Richard Cannings, if you could take the floor, please, for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the two witnesses here before us today. It's been very interesting, and I'm going to start with Mr. Greer. It's always good to talk to another fellow Okanagan resident, and I know you have a background in Accelerate Okanagan, and some years ago I had the opportunity to tour the facilities, and it was great that you expanded this conversation beyond patents into other more, in many ways, more important circles. And I'm just wondering if you could. Mr. Williams actually asked most of the questions that I had marked down, but I just wondered if you could give some concrete examples of perhaps where governments have stepped up and helped these social purpose organizations, and how we can do more of that, or where we really need the federal government and specifically to step in. Some concrete examples of how we could help.
Yes, thank you. Nice to see you, Richard. Same welcome to another Okanaganite. A couple examples, great questions. How have governments stepped up to help? The federal government has a social innovation strategy and social finance strategy. There's $900 million strategy supporting this. The government has recently rolled out a program called the Investment Readiness Program, which is specific support for social purpose organizations to improve and increase their investment readiness. And there's some great examples. We work here with a nonprofit, a charitable daycare with multi-sites, about 7 or 8 sites here in Kelowna. And they, through some coaching, through the first round of the Investment Readiness Program, slowly got their confidence to take on investment, and they purchased the farm where a daycare was where they were operating a daycare. So now they've secured their economic future. They took out a big loan, secured a place for them to operate for as long as they want, and kids are accessing daycare on a farm. It's pretty cool. So there's a good example of a positive story. On the other side of the coin, social purpose organizations, most of them being nonprofits, are left out of organizations like BDC. BDC serves businesses. So all the innovation financing that's going into the Canadian economy is basically leaving SPOs out of the equation. That would be a place or an example, but the examples continue. SHRED, not applicable. The small business financing program, not applicable for SPOs. So there's major gaps in policy to support social innovation.
So in short, you would like to see more federal government support for nonprofits akin to that is given to businesses. That's, in short, one of your main recommendations?
I think that's the main recommendation, include social purpose organizations. There's tremendous value to Canadians.
Okay, thank you. And how much time do I have, Chair?
You have about 2.5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll turn to Mr. Frank and the Conference Board of Canada. And you obviously do a lot of measuring. You come up with report cards that are dealing with a lot of different categories of the performance of Canada and businesses and individuals. We hear a lot about data in this committee, and I'm just wondering, it sounds like you're going to expand your studies and your report card quite dramatically. Just wondering where you're seeing a lack of data, or where is data hard to come by that, in my previous life, I often was trying to get data from different provinces and also of Canada, the United States, and it was difficult to find data sources that were usable because they were measured in different ways. And I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on where the federal government could step in and perhaps help organizations such as yours get good data that we can make good decisions based on.
Thank you very much. That is indeed the question, especially for researchers, whether it be Conference Board or anywhere. So the short answer is, for example, our Innovation Report Card, we do use secondary data, all the data that you mentioned. So from WIPO, from OECD, from the World Bank, from IMF. So we are collecting this data and we're using essentially proprietary models to cut and slice and dice it and to try to get insights specifically for Canada. And then we do mixed methods, of course. So the reality is we need cooperation as part of this. So for example, the entire expert panel report that created IPON was a survey, and it surveyed 600 some odd organizations, or not, probably 50 organizations right across the entire innovation spectrum. So we need engagement in that area. But let me say this, here's the answer, is the government has an incredible wealth of data, and it is necessarily very confidential. And for example, let's take one, SHRED. You have an example of every single R&D project that has been approved in Canada. If you anonymize that completely and disaggregate it, you can provide some of the insights to researchers in confidence to understand aggregately of what's happening. That's one good example.
Okay.
Another one, when we
I
look
think
at
we only have
StatsCan,
time for the one, but thank you. That was
Sure.
an excellent example. And we're going to move on to the second round. And I see Mr. Greer's hands up. But if you have any other comments, please submit them in writing. The members will direct their questions as they wish. Mr. Lobb, you've got 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. My first question is to Mr. Frank, if I have that right, Mr. Frank. The question is, and I think you have this in one of your reports, the idea that we have a large number of positions that go unfilled in this country that maybe are not necessarily the highest of high tech in the way that you're sitting behind a computer coding day after day, but maybe you're operating a transport truck, maybe you're operating an excavator, a hi-ho, whatever it might be, that does require a degree of technical understanding, but also the actual technology that's used. And in your report that you mentioned, really embracing the ability to use software and maybe some sort of a artificial intelligence, if you want to use that well-used word these days, but really helping those companies that will fill the actual jobs that we're really needing in this economy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I certainly can. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'll just start off by saying, so the Conference Board is a founder of the Future Skills Center. So that is a over $200 million center that's specifically looking at that problem. And so under the center, we've conducted 3 research projects. But what's nice about it is it's focusing on sort of for example, the clean economy, the blue oceans economy, and the digital economy. So even just taking blue oceans, for example, you're looking at essentially high risk, low mobility jobs. For example, we call them HRLM. And how do you move them into high growth, high demand jobs? For example, cybersecurity and software. So you can't change a barista into a threat vulnerability assessment analyst, but there are pathways, and you can look at the time and the cost and the different programs, including things like micro-credentialing or certification, in order to look at the skills gaps. So when you look at the skills gaps, they can be crossed with certain education and certain cost. And when you look at where that is across the country, you definitely can see where the opportunities are across clean, blue, and actually last week we released the digital economy occupational pathways. So that's one way to go about it.
We've had a few guests. You're done your thought there?
No,
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. You're finished your thought, though, for what you're talking about before?
Thank you.
The next question I wanted to ask you was, we've had a few guests that have appeared, and they've talked about the amount of investment in universities, which is important, but it's also talked about the return on the investment, on that investment. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Because it is a tremendous amount of money. It is a tremendous amount of money, and not always are we seeing the full return on that investment. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. As I mentioned, we did a research study for the Council of Ontario Universities just in Ontario. It's actually quite substantial. We looked at the economic impact of the universities on the regional economies. So we looked at the activities, we looked at the human capital. In fact, we did direct, indirect, and induced impacts. And I just have a stat here from that report. The combined impact of university spendings in Ontario is $96.2 billion, which is about 11.7% of the provincial GDP. That was in 2018 to 2019. And just a comment on human capital.
Sorry to interrupt you for a second, though.
Yeah.
I'm saying like the return on the investment of the of the research, not on the spin-offs of all the other jobs, but I'm talking about the actual return on investment for the technology.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, certainly we have still the innovation paradox in play here. So it is a problem where we have great ideas and great output, but it is not translated into the economy. So that translation or return on investment is low. It is an Achilles heel right now.
Thank you. And over to Mr. Sousa. 5 minutes.
Yep. Thank you very much, both of you gentlemen. I appreciated your presentation and your deliberation. And as you can appreciate, this committee has been formed precisely because of the gap that we see in support of commercialization of IP. And you've both done a good job recognizing some of the strengths that are in the system and some of the shortcomings that are required. And both of you have reiterated what gets measured gets done, and to ensure that we have the proper data to formulate resolutions to some of those shortcomings. And if I may, Mr. Frank, I want to go to you first. The Conference Board of Canada, a lot of forward top individuals, business leaders who are accomplished, looking at some of these situations in terms of strengthening Canada's economic well-being. And the challenges that you've posed and the 5 recommendations by way of providing greater incentives, supports for innovation by way of funding some of those issues, prioritizing some of our IP rights, and of course sharing data and then measuring what we do. My question is this. We have, I think all of us agree that more needs to be done in terms of protecting our sovereignty as a nation regarding our innovation and then commercialization of this innovation. What is the private sector doing to facilitate? I mean, you've highlighted much of your recommendations we already are doing to an extent, but what more can we do to ensure the private sector takes some of the risk or is prepared to assume more risk?
That is an intractable problem. I mean, there was a report by the Center for Productivity and Prosperity that concluded that the problem actually is lack of internal competition in the country. So that is part of it. I don't want to be glib and say part of it could be that we're a bit complacent and lack the ambition. If you look at the Rideau Hall's Innovation Index, which is really more on the soft side of it, they did a mixed methods approach, and they asked Canadians to rank who's responsible for fostering innovation. And, that you could rank your top 3 or so, and half of the people said it's the federal government. 45% said the universities. 36% said individuals, then startups, and 27% said business. So there is a culture here. I'm not so sure if it's a change management issue beyond a straight policy issue. So in summary, again, we have a lack of competition that's regulatory, and we do have a culture of innovation issue here as well.
And about that regulatory piece, like what's the challenge?
Well, the short answer is, in examining why businesses, are reluctant, they can't punch above their weight. They look at the space and perhaps even freedom to operate. We recently did a study on independent towers for telecom, for example, choosing one area to try to answer your question. And we found it was very difficult to compete on infrastructure-based competition. For example, when you go to Europe and other places, it's service-based, where you can get much lower rates of service, and of course 5G, which is the basis of the innovation economy. And so we can see regulatory barriers to innovation in the country.
Thank you. Mr. Greer, is the social impact and social entrepreneurs, are they facing the same kind of burden?
Yeah. To your previous question, I did a study a few years ago and really pointed out the data that we all feel in that Canada is good at startups and bad at scale-ups. And if we're going to expect businesses and SPOs to invest in intellectual property and commercialization, we need to get them past the startup stage. We need to get them into profitability, and focus on profitability, not necessarily focus on intellectual property or investment.
If I may, whose responsibility is for the profitability, right? I mean, you don't want government adjudicating on deals. You want to make certain there's a collaboration between all the sectors. How do we facilitate or encourage some of those incentives for those private investors to take it on? And that's why we see so much of other jurisdictions around the world buying up our IP.
So a couple of things on that. We've said several times in this conversation, we measure what matters. Are we measuring profitability? Generally speaking, I'm seeing the government measure jobs, revenue, and investment, and not profitability. That seems to be where the effort is placed.
Okay, thank you.
So I think there's a bit of an oversight there.
Thank you. Monsieur Blanchet-Joncat, la parole est à vous.
Mr. Blanchet-Joncat, 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going back to you, Mr. Frank. In May 2022, your report shows that the international agreements stress protecting intellectual property, and this does our system allow us to sufficiently protect our commercial secrets? If not, what improvements can be made?
Again, I think we need structure. That was a recommendation that you've heard all the way back to when Mr. Basili and Mr. McLean were talking about being able to build the awareness and thus the protection, and answer your question. So the idea of programs that provide education right from post-secondary, frankly, as they move into the economy, through to IP intelligence, so knowing where that IP is and where it can hit the marketplace. All the experts that we currently don't have access to, we do. Enable freedom of operation is something that the Innovation Asset Collective looks at, and we need more of that in order to compete.
Merci, Monsieur Frank.
Thank you. Next question. According to you, how can international trade agreements, or how do they affect intellectual property rights and use in Canada? What are the consequences?
Is that directed at me? Yeah, sure. I mean, we do have international joint S&T cooperation agreements that are leveraged quite a bit. So I would think, and those, by the way, are both academic and business, usually when you look at global affairs and how that's done. I think that it's beyond Canada. I think that we have the recommendations here for commercialization within Canada, but we need to leverage those joint S&T partnerships because most of them are with innovative nations. And essentially the 2% or 3% of our highly qualified intellectual property is our ticket to the other 98%.
Merci, Monsieur Frank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frank. How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair? 30 seconds. Mr. Frank, according to you, what priority should the government have to ensure greater intellectual property and protect our rights and investments?
We need to have, nothing happens in a vacuum is the answer. We need to be able to have the development of an idea at one end of the innovation spectrum, move it through to the company level, and then move it through to, as Andrew just mentioned, measurement of the prosperity and impact on the country. That's the continuum, and we need systems across that entire continuum.
Thank you for a concise answer. Mr. Cannings, if you can bring us home for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I'll turn to Mr. Greer and just ask you to maybe expand on the point that you made that not all IP is patentable. Some you have to protect with contracts and licenses. If you could give some specific examples of IP that would be best or only protected in this way, and how we do it now, and how we can support businesses and organizations that want to do this.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Cannings. So business process innovation, there's a lot of it that just doesn't deserve to be patentable. It's best protected through a contract or a license, and you can license the process to other organizations. This can happen from a nonprofit. It can happen from a for-profit. If we speak specifically about the tech sector, where I have years of experience as well, much of the code that goes into games, technologies, that sort of thing, if you release a patent, you have to release the code. And then it's significantly difficult to actually litigate to protect that and prove that someone's actually copying your code. It's a huge process. So a better strategy for many tech companies is to just protect it through trade secrets. That's licensing, contracts, that kind of thing. And putting it into a patent is actually highly risky. So I think there's a lot of discussion around the IP sphere to, get more patents, but there's a lot of companies that don't want to do that. We need to be focused on making sure that the rest of the protection is sort of included in this strategy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tremendous input. Thank you, both witnesses. Great discussion this morning. I wish we could continue, but we are at time. So we'll suspend just for a minute while we get our next panel up. Okay, we're good to go. And welcome back to those that have been here for the first part, and welcome to our new witnesses. I'd like to make a few comments for their benefit as we get started. Just to wait until I recognize your name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of the screen for floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select your desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. To continue this discussion, we have Jarrett Lehman, who is from the Center for Indigenous Innovation and Technology, the Chief Strategy Officer. And we have Krista Jones, who is the Chief Delivery Officer, Ventures and Ecosystems Group for Mars Discovery District. We'll be opening up with Mr. Lehman for 5 minutes, please.
Wajuanin, Jarrett Ndisnakash, Magnetawan First Nation in Donjaba, Kimedid and Dodom. Hello, everyone. My name is Jarrett Lehman, and I'm a member of Magnetawan First Nation, located in Southern Ontario, out in the Muskoka region. I am a co-founder and volunteer for the Center for Indigenous Innovation and Technology. We have been operating for about 5 years, and our goal is to increase Indigenous representation in the technology and innovation spaces. We achieve that by undertaking programming such as on-the-job training, work placements, as well as research. Canada's major cities are often seen as a major growth of innovation, and Indigenous people play a huge part in that in Canada, in health, technology, and many other spaces. Historically, Indigenous people have had little control over their data collection initiatives and research, or research for private businesses that are initiated by non-Indigenous institutions. Indigenous data sovereignty expresses the inherent right and jurisdiction of an Indigenous nation to control the collection, ownership, and application of their data. The Government of Canada's dual commitment to reconciliation and open government presents an opportunity to support Indigenous data sovereignty as a key foundation for developing local, regional, and data capacities, self-government partnerships in the technology and innovation sectors, spurring valuable intellectual property and other assets. In exploring multiple visions held by Indigenous people through CIIT about the future and what it means for younger generations and nation building, technology reconciliation, and the opportunity for Indigenous peoples to participate equally in the digital economy and its impact sectors is a common priority shared both by the urban and the rural communities. There has been lots of great examples of Indigenous innovation that have happened over the last couple of years. An example may be the Missinaibi Cree First Nation Emergency Preparedness Application that's being used to help Indigenous communities be evacuated in times of flood or emergencies. Trent University, for example, offers a learning experience with a unique mix of Indigenous knowledge and Western teachings, learning from Indigenous and non-Indigenous faculty, elders, and guest speakers, and scholars from across all of North America to receive a Bachelor of Science of Indigenous Innovation Studies, or Indigenous Environmental Studies and Sciences. We've also partnered with and had opportunity to work with the Coalition of Innovation Leaders Against Racism, which provides new pathways and transformational opportunities for Canada's Black, Indigenous peoples, and people of color. CIIT, the Center for Indigenous Innovation and Technology, along with CELAR as a helper, helped us work with TD Bank on a research project. Some of the things that we heard from our engagement across the year from Indigenous community was the idea or the understanding of self-determination and co-creation. And we understand that the Constitution provides existing rights under Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982. We also recognize that it's inherent that it may find expressions in treaties and land claims and agreements in the context of the Crown's relationship with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Through the United Nations and other, they have recognized the need for alternative metrics post the Sustainable Development Goals with some form of Indigenous development factor. There was also recognition of the need for a much greater level of community involvement and partnership in the gathering of cultural relevant information and data. Some broad areas of discussion that we heard include understanding the intricacies between the collective and the individual rights and their link to wealth generation, a deeper understanding of Indigenous self-determination and a co-creation process. While neither governance arrangements nor social collectives are static, they are dynamic entities that may be modified and reconfigured according to changing conditions and needs. Other areas of law that consider collective interests, such as labor relations, continue to understand the dynamic changing conditions of the need of the social collective. An example of co-creation was taken in 2017 by the Ontario government by the development of the Indigenous Institutes Act. It is a great project. It was a great project, and it created a framework for ongoing collaboration between Ontario and Indigenous institutes that would support a strong and independent Indigenous institute sector overseen by an Indigenous-controlled governing council. The City of Toronto also has done some innovative work in the concept of, or in the creation and its approach with the development of the Data Governance First Nations and Métis and Inuit Data Research Circle and the development of the city's Indigenous Data Governance Strategic Framework.
Thank you very much for all that. And unfortunately, we're at time, so maybe if you've got more, you can work it into answers to questions. And now I'll ask for Krista Jones to take the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. My name is Krista Jones, and I'm the Chief Delivery Officer for Mars Discovery District. Mars is a large-scale commercialization engine that has supported 4,000 Canadian entrepreneurs and their deep IP-based SMEs over the last 20 years in key growth sectors. We are focused on the critical, underserved middle stage of the economic growth cycle, where the commercialization of IP and translational research grows into category-leading companies that increase productivity and boost GDP. A big thank you for all of you for supporting this work through the Scale Up platform that's partially funded by FedDev Ontario. A recent independent study of the economic impact for Mars-supported SMEs showed that over the past 12 years, they contributed $29.6 billion to GDP with an annualized growth rate of 20.7%. This group is growing at more than 10 times Ontario's compound annual GDP growth. This growth rate is what will fuel Canada's future prosperity, our productivity, and anchor our Canadian leadership in critical advanced industries. It's what will enable Canada to build major knowledge-based economies around our existing strength in creating global leading IP. Nearly half of the world's largest corporations today are in the technology and healthcare sectors and are collectively worth over $9.5 trillion. This is more than double their peers in the energy, materials, and financial services sectors combined. Many other speakers have highlighted that the business enterprise R&D expenditure is one of the leading indicators for economic growth, and that Canada lags its international peers and the OECD average for the last 20 years by 30.5% in 2021 alone. In Canada, our top R&D spenders represent 61% of total Canadian spend and are focused in the technology, healthcare, and industrial advanced industries. But there are only 21% of our 100 largest companies, and none are in the top 250 global patent holders. The pullback of the industrial sector's R&D in Canada has left only one Canadian company, BlackBerry, on the list of the top 250 patent holders globally at the 117th position. To truly compete at the global level, we need more Canadian firms that are category leaders and can compete internationally, like Shopify, Magna, Constellation Software, OpenText. We need to protect and nurture our intellectual property and talent in the same way we protect our lumber, precious minerals, and oil and gas resources. In April of 2021, Mars wrote a white paper we called Good, Better, Best, outlining the pathways to drive long-term economic and sustainability for Canada. Unfortunately, Canada's choices have largely been in the good category. This is where we license our IP directly, or where larger foreign-owned entities establish a Canadian-based R&D center as a result of acquisition or via government stimulus. This is not in our better and best categories. The recent deal with Volkswagen to invest $13 billion to be matched with a largely in-kind contribution of $7 billion into a Canadian-based EV gigafactory is a case in point case in point example of good outcomes. Current market conditions are threatening to erase hard-won gains for this stage of growth in the last 5 to 7 years, putting urgent pressure on Canada's ability to build our own knowledge-based economies that allow us to build and to add persistent value in the global value chain to create new industries. Domestic SMEs have to compete with foreign multinationals with much deeper pools of capital for talent and market share. The sheer volume of Canadian R&D talent working for multinationals, both in and out of the country, plays a role in driving the economic performance outside of Canada, allowing other major economies to outperform on the global stage. The World Intellectual Property Organization's Global Innovation Index ranking shows Canada progressing slowly year over year based on the strength of our innovation inputs, but our lack of domestic commercial outputs in key advanced industries are keeping us from regaining top 10 global status and increasing our productivity and GDP numbers. It's for all of these reasons that Mars remains laser focused on the critical underserved middle stage of the economic growth cycle. This is the key to convert IP and translational research into high growth category leading companies that are domestically headquartered global firms. As the global value chain increasingly shifts from the tangible to intangible based economies, the long-term risk to Canada of not fostering and growing category-leading Canadian headquartered advanced industry firms is severe. We need a critical mass of startups in our ecosystem that are able to scale into companies that anchor intellectual property-focused industries in Canada and solve for major impacts on the world. This is why we need at least... Thanks.
Thank you very much. We're very tight on time, so I'll keep things rolling over to Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you very much for that. Christy, you talked about foreign internationals. Would Volkswagen be a foreign national company?
A foreign multinational, yes.
Of the announcement of $13+ billion that is going to be shoveled out to them, how much of would be IP created or research and development would stay with a Canadian company, or would that be all shipped back to Germany?
So I think I want to be clear. This is a good outcome for Canada. The Volkswagen investment is a good outcome. It will produce economic returns for the country.
We agree that economic activity is good in Canada, but just the IP, please. What on the agreement that you know, is their IP going to stay in Canada or get shipped back to Germany?
I'm not aware of the details of the deal, so I'm not sure what the IP provisions are.
If you were advising the government of Canada, would you require the agreement that some of that IP would stay in a subsidy or a branch out of Volkswagen? Or how would you structure the deal better than your words were good, better, best? And if this is the lowest of the three, how do we get it better?
So getting it better would be to actually create it such that you do keep the IP in Canada, but more importantly, you keep the commercial activity here. Because if you look at the economic outputs, it's not just about where the IP is owned, it's actually about where you drive the sales from, where the taxes go, how many jobs that you create around it. And so that's where when we look at the good outcomes, what we want to see happen is that commercialization piece of it, so that we're getting the benefit of the full value of the IP, not just the ownership of it.
So in that example, we're paying seemingly every salary in that plant for the next 10 years. And in 10 years' time, if the technology is still valid or the plant's still valid, there might be a net benefit afterwards. Is that your understanding of how that the agreement is somewhat broken apart? It's a 10-year deal?
And as I said, I have not actually seen the agreement, so it's other than just looking at the coverage that occurs. That's my understanding as to how it is, that we will generate good paying jobs as a result of that deal, but that it would be if we could put similar investments into companies where they're actually putting the sales divisions, getting the taxes from the revenues into Canada would be the better and the best type outcomes that we're looking for.
In an alternate universe, if the government decided to give your organization the $13 billion, what kind of things would you have potentially have done with that large amount of money?
Great question. And that's a lot of money. And to be clear, what we would do is spend a large portion of that investing directly into the companies that we are actually supporting. And a big portion of that would actually go into trying to generate procurement, both domestically and internationally for the companies that we support. Because what we really need to see happen is more procurement, more revenue focused. Earlier, somebody was talking about profitability. We need to make sure that we're able to scale our companies. And scaling the companies is not about just developing more patents. It's actually about generating commercial agreements and sales capability into the organization. So that's how we would actually start to split up that money.
You worked for or worked with that ultimately ended up getting foreign government funding? Canadian Volkswagen that went to Germany to get billions of dollars from their government?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first part.
So, of the clients that you work with, how many have potentially opened up operations in R&D or other production in other countries? I guess would be my question.
I don't have a percentage at the top of my fingers, but I would say that there is a significant portion that has. As we look at it, these companies are independent businesses who are making the best decision with all of the options in front of them today. And in my experience in working with the entrepreneurs in Canada over the last 15 years, they have every intention of remaining Canadian headquartered and wanting to do business from here. But what happens is the reality of financing and funding and business opportunities forces them to make decisions that sometimes end up out of Canadian control.
And Krista, one last question before I move over to our other witness. Could you provide in writing the top 5 paid positions in your organizations? I understand it's a non-profit, so I'm assuming that needs to be able to be disclosed. Could you provide in writing the top 5 paid positions within the organizations? Now moving over to Mr. Lehman, thank you for your testimony today. You mentioned that open government. What is open government in your eyes? What kind of definition how did you describe that?
30 seconds.
Yep. Thank you for the question. I think with open government, we're looking at, in this context, it was looking at working with having it transparency available to work with, for example, First Nation governments, and being transparent and open around what the goals are trying to achieve. And so, for example, there was open data initiatives that the government had put out that also did at sometimes conflict with Indigenous sovereignty. But I think that overall, that was my understanding.
Thank you so much for both witnesses today.
Thank you. Monsieur Lauzon, pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Lauzon, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, thank you to the witnesses for their presentations. I'm going to start with Mr. Lehman. You really piqued my curiosity when you talked about technological reconciliation to move forward. I'd like to know a little bit more about your ecosystem that you might have with the future and for creation of intellectual property before it is commercialized. What concrete measures could the federal government adopt to help you? You suggested solutions for technological reconciliation, but what else can be done?
Thank you for that question. I think that more investment is needed in the Indigenous innovation space. I think a lot of this work that we've been undertaking at the Centre for Indigenous Innovation and Technology have been undertaken with the private sector, and a lot of the work has been done through volunteers like myself. And so I think that looking at models like Ontario, for example, investing in Indigenous learning institutions to help with research, to help grow our staffing and our people, to be able to contribute to the digital economy, to be able to contribute to creating valuable IP that can help our communities, but also help others around the world.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You also referred to your organization, which is a young one, barely 5 years old, and the main challenges that you've been confronted with as a young organization. I'm sure that the earlier years are always the most difficult ones. And can you tell me a bit about how commercialization of intellectual property can occur and how the government can help overcome obstacles for a young organization like your own?
Yes. So one of the examples that we had, we were able to do a panel with youth and young professionals. And one of the things that we were talking about and focusing on was gaming and entertainment in digital media. And how does an Indigenous community be represented in that media? And so that's an example that was brought up in that discussion. And so I think furthering those conversations, listening to the young innovators, there was a panel of 4 or 5, and we did have representation from all regions of Canada. And so one of the things that was important in that was brought up was supporting the ethical and moral perspectives, such as the local observation for knowledge in the Arctic, the exchange, but also ensuring that there is a collective approach to the wealth model of the generation of IP. So for example, if you look at like the Helsik Nation, for example, they for years talked about how they were there during the Ice Age. And they just found evidence recently about how that was true. How is that data knowledge? That is, it is through art. And then the other thing that we heard, particularly from the youth, was art and culture in IP. So what is the future of collaboration research or related impact sectors, plans to support the exploration of creative possibilities in arts, science, local and Indigenous knowledge and understanding, interpreting and presenting interdisciplinaries and intercorrelations between social, ecological, and technology systems. So.
Merci beaucoup, mais vous...
Thank you very much. You're making me even more curious because you're talking about traditions and how can we integrate traditional knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, in nature-based development and commercialization of sustainable technologies in Canada based on Indigenous knowledge.
Yeah, so I think, thank you, to answer that question, I think that we need to look at more a process around co-creation, around collective ownership in an IP. So for example, if an Indigenous a company is creating a product that has an Indigenous knowledge base in it, who owns that portion of knowledge and how is the commercialization of that knowledge giving back to the Indigenous community that has the collective ownership.
Merci. Peut-être une...
Thank you very much. Maybe a last question for Ms. Jones. I think there's an investment example in Canada, in Ontario, with good intellectual property protections, and I'd like to add that Volkswagen, the factory will be built by Volkswagen, financed by Volkswagen, and there will be good results for the Canadian government investment. Do you think this is a good result, a good investment?
So, like I said,
et que le gouvernement du Québec sont en accord.
And here the government of Quebec is in agreement with the investment made by Volkswagen in Ontario, including the Prime Minister of
Ms. Jones?
Yes, as I said at the beginning, I do believe that the investment by Volkswagen and in Volkswagen is a good investment for Canada to make. That was not the point of my example. The point of my example was to point out that while we do investments like that, you could look at other ones recently, we need to do equal investment into the part of the ecosystem which is growing or scaling companies to get better and best outcomes, which is where you have a kind of the full Canadian headquartered, Canadian-owned environment in place. So this is an either or, not an either or.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Monsieur Blanchet-Joquin.
Mr. Blanchet-Joquin. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to take my time to present a motion, and the preamble is that a motion on a study for research and publication in French. And we've worked on this in committee, and I even presented a motion on 2 February, and I made an explicit request, very clear, in writing to the minister, and I asked him to provide information on institutions that subsidize universities, and we left the ministry time to undertake some research, and the first response we received was provided to the committee on 21 March. And we see that after a month and a half, the response to my questions was incomplete. And so then we asked the ministry to provide the missing information, and then we waited. We waited. And on 30 March, we decided here at the committee a majority consensus to once again call on the ministry to come to talk to us about the budget for research, but also that the ministry should come back with complete information in response to my 2 February request. And Chair, and I act in good faith. And in April, on 17 April, I myself wrote to Minister Champagne, the Minister of Industry and Innovation, and to say to him that this is very important information that we requested, and we don't have that information yet in order to provide or to prepare our report on publication and research in French. We want to know what the situation is, and we want to have complete information. And there we received more information on 24 April. Unfortunately, once again, there was only a partial response. And Chair, and I always do things in good faith. And when I sent the letter to the minister, I also sent a copy to the 4 funding organizations. And even the chief of staff for the minister was aware of this, and there were points, clear points on what information we were missing. And so I think it was very clear what we were looking for. And here, once again today, I have to repeat that we've waited not 1, 2, but 3 months to get a reply. And so I made a request once, again, and now the 3rd time that I have to take my time here in the committee to raise this issue again, my time for questioning the witnesses. And this is a precious time because you know that because of this, I will have less time to question witnesses. So I would like to read the motion because I think it's something that you want me to do, I'm sure. So
Minister is working on this. There's 20 years of information that he's got some partial reports, and he's trying to get more information to us. Later on in the meeting, I was going to suggest we have a subcommittee meeting on the first hour of Tuesday so we can look at the studies coming forward, including this study, and get that scheduled into our meeting, and so that we know that we will have the answers that you're looking for. But I think at this point, we know that your request is active, and we're trying to get responses from what I understand. But I am new in this chair, but I have been reading all of your requests from previous meetings, and I know that it's a live an active request.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur. Thank you very much, Chair. Once again, I feel that I'm I've given you the chronology of the dates, and this is not a serious reply, a serious effort to be transparent in providing this information requested with the support of the committee. And so, Chair, I think the government and its ministry is not providing a fulsome response. And I have to question their intentions and their lack of respect for the committee. And last week, we even had to delay the directives for preparing the report that we have to make because we don't have the information we need. So I think this is a very serious issue, and I'm sorry that I have to bring this up again, and I would like to read my motion to see if we can have unanimous consent to adopt this motion and to ask once again that the ministry provide us with full information. That the committee requested the Ministry of Industry, Science and Innovation to provide the missing information concerning the questions raised by Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, and at the committee meeting on 2 February, and that this be done at the latest for May 11 a.m. And the missing information are the following: the number of study bursaries in English and French for the Natural Research Council and human sciences support over the last 20 years. And secondly, the amount of bursaries for English. I'm reading the motion.
I think my suggestion is that we move this to the subcommittee discussion on Tuesday so that we can get it scheduled in. We are over time for your intervention this morning. And so I'd like to get this scheduled. It is a serious request, and we know it's serious, but I think we need to have that discussion in a more time than we have right now. So if I could move on to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, point d'information.
Point of information. I was very clear in making my request that I was going to ask for unanimous consent from the committee to discuss this motion.
That there wasn't unanimous consent. So, Mr. Cannings for 6, please. Mr. Cannings?
Point of information, Chair. Can I ask for a vote?
If you're going to challenge the chair, but I've said this isn't in committee business. This doesn't relate to the report that we're doing right now, and so we would need to have notice on it. So, Mr. Cannings, if we can go ahead. Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
Oui. Mr. Blanchet, I understand that you don't want to go to a vote.
J'aimerais vérifier avec les...
I'd like to check with the clerk when there is a motion that has been adopted and is now being amended. Do we have to go to a vote? Because we've already voted on it and there is not really any amendment. And I wonder if it's relevant to be able to have a vote.
Mr. Lobb?
Thanks again. And as the chair would well know, and Mr. Jonquière would know as well, you're welcome to read your motion at any time you want, but it's out of order. To be honest, it's out of order for this meeting, so let's just discuss it on Tuesday if that's what we're going to do, and we'll do if that's okay. No disrespect, but...
Thank you. And we've got some good witnesses here, and we're having a good discussion. We will have that discussion on Tuesday when we get into subcommittee. And thank you for bringing it forward. And thank you, Mr. Lobb and Mr. Lauzon. Over to you, Mr. Canning, please.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to direct my first questions to Mr. Lehman. You mentioned, the issue of Indigenous knowledge and Western teachings. It's an issue that I've dealt with in my previous life as a biologist in large-scale ecosystem planning and national efforts. And one thing that I took from those experiences was the proprietary nature of Indigenous knowledge, and in many cases proprietary not just to a nation but to a family within that nation. And I'm just wondering if you could expand. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this. If you could expand, you've mentioned this, but it's a big subject, and you talked about data frameworks and open data. Just perhaps spend some time telling us how this fits in with our normal view on IP and innovation.
Thank you for that question. So I think when we're looking at IP, and I think when I was talking about the Indigenous Institute sector, we heard earlier in the meeting about universities and colleges, and those would be an Indigenous representation of that. That we currently have. We have 9 of them in Ontario. And so how do we encourage research to happen at those Indigenous institutions that are based on reserve or within community? And how do we, we understand from the government reports that there's no universally accepted definition of Indigenous knowledge and cultural expression, which presents an opportunity and a challenge. But generally, we know that they refer to traditional knowledge and ways of being. But from the youth that we engaged and from the professionals that young professionals that we talked to, we heard a strong desire to further understand the intersectionalities between between the knowledge and the Indigenous data sovereignty principles and data management and classification. Particularly in the video and digital media. So what that means is how are the frameworks that we currently have set up going to support, for example, a collective interest of an IP of a sovereign nation that operates within the jurisdiction of Canada, and how does that go out to the world while respecting the UN's position and our commitment on Indigenous data sovereignty. I think there's just a lot more study needed, and it's complex, and it's not going to be the same everywhere. And I think that's different nations have different approaches. But what we do know is that collection of data and turning that into IP or using that is a very, very sensitive subject and topic for our community. As somebody that has a grandparent that went to residential schools, that was why we're so careful about our data and how our knowledge is being used. And I think that we have to think of a process or a co-creation process bringing through the community in order to understand the value of this topic and how it can really help the Indigenous community prosper economically. We have a lot of great Indigenous innovators, and they're contributing a lot today. Let's bring them forward.
And do you have, again, my questions are usually around this just so that I can understand better. Do you have any specific examples of Indigenous innovators who have gone down that path, specifically dealing with, Indigenous knowledge and have come to a conclusion or come to a place where everyone is comfortable, and what lessons that might have for us?
I can think of an example, like from the technology perspective, in regards to how is Indigenous culture and expressions represented in video games, and how is that made? How is the money from that game made off of that cultural expression, and where does the wealth model go from that knowledge that's used? And so, for example, that may be an example of an Indigenous game designer that's going forward to include those aspects of knowledge in their game that they then share with the world. That may be an example, but I don't know if the frameworks are set up in the country in order to really look at a collective interest and knowledge of ownership of what, of TKs or TCEs.
Okay, thanks. How much?
Got about a minute and 10 seconds.
So I will turn to Ms. Jones. You mentioned procurement as an important component of government support. And I'm just wondering, again, if you have examples there. It seems that procurement is so important, not just to provide funding during that difficult period for innovative companies, but also for them to show to other clients that, at least my own government believes in us, that kind of thing. If you have any further examples of that could be instructive to us.
Thank you. When we look at procurement, it's deep and specific, and different procurement needs are required depending on the different sector of the advanced industry that you're looking at. So when we look at some of the examples, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing on clean tech. And we're trying to create procurement marketplaces for large governments like the federal government, as well as for small municipalities, to enable us to help those companies, help the government agencies actually figure out how to qualify and protect and their RFP process to enable them to procure properly, and to give the startup companies a chance in that environment. And so those are some of the examples that when we look at government procurement.
Thank you very much. And now we have Mr. Soroka for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the witnesses for coming today. I'll start off with Ms. Jones. There's been several articles written lately about how the government's or this Liberal government's approach to innovation or IT has been mediocre at best. What ways do you think we can improve upon that from a government perspective?
So I think, improving the overall policy is a big question. What I'd rather do is comment on a couple of really specific suggestions that we think could help add to what is already underway. One of them is right now we really need to look at the growth risk capital that's available in the ecosystem for deep IP-based companies, because it's that lack of availability of that risk capital that actually sometimes causes the IP to end up in foreign hands. So that's one of the areas. Another area is looking actually at the commercialization talent that is required. And this is beyond the engineers and the developers that we're looking at. One of the things about our ecosystem that holds, I think, the growth of these sectors back is the lack of executives that live in Canada that actually have experience in some of these advanced industries and growing companies to 100 million, 500 million, $1 billion in revenue. And so some work and some focus on kind of the executive level and the mid-management and above kind of commercialization talent, I think, is a big gap in the innovation spectrum of how we actually need to be able to provide that support. And one of the last ones is on some of the regulatory processes and actually environments that exist that help our companies, some of the rules that help our companies actually be able to compete kind of globally. If you look at even on the health side, being able to have a regulatory environment that is kind of sought after globally, like the FDA is, such that when companies are approved here, they can actually be viewed as approved globally.
Okay. Now, when it comes to these companies investing, such as Volkswagen, billions of dollars, do you think besides jobs we should be looking at some kind of an agreement, whether it's licensing contracts or even a partner in the patents, that they get a percentage of this back to sort of reclaim the money that they've invested? Is that appropriate or not?
Is it appropriate? That's a tough question for somebody from my vantage point to answer. But what I look at is what is appropriate, I think, is that we incentivize, and there's various means of providing that incentive, that people who invest in Canada, and as ourselves as well as foreign companies, that there is an incentive for them to actually buy Canadian and use and help these companies that are actually growing. So for me, if what you're talking about in the types of work is some way to ensure that the investments come in and enable the incentive for Canadian-owned IP and Canadian to remain here, then I would say yes, it's appropriate.
That's exactly what I was getting at, is more about when you're investing up to potentially $14 billion in one company, it's one thing to talk about that we're going to create jobs, but you also want that sustainability, because if that's all you're going to get is out of it is jobs, well, you almost could pay the money for each individual for the rest of their life and save money in the end. So it shouldn't just be about job creation. I think there has to be that retention of knowledge as well as then the retention of the financial gain from this through either, like I say, licensing contracts or patents, being a partner in that as well.
So I think I think there's multiple complex environments that end up in the value chain around this entity, that I think it is about making sure that we understand the full ecosystem of innovations that are occurring. So yes, I think that there is the need for us to actually look after the homegrown IP that surrounds kind of an entity like an EV plant that Volkswagen is putting in Canada.
Okay, well, thank you for that then. I'll move on to Mr. Lehman there. You talk about how we're trying to make sure we do reconciliation through IP, and I think you've given a few examples, but do you think the government is giving you enough funding, or is there more that they could be doing on, and what various efforts would make it better for your organization?
Very short answer, please.
Yes, additional funding would be welcome. We have, as an organization, have received funding to help support youth summer learners, and that is it from the federal government. The rest has been done through private sector as well as volunteer in the private sector. So additional work is needed. I think coordination around the topic, around commercializing, making money off of traditional knowledge and ITK, like that, I think is something that needs to be supported, and I believe that it is underway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now,
you'd like to supply, please write.
Yeah, please do write in if you've got more information or details. And if we can now move to Valerie Bradford, if you could unmute, and you've got 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our committee and to our chair, and welcome to our witnesses. It's so nice to have you with us today. So, Ms. Jones, in my previous role as an economic development officer for the City of Kitchener, I had the opportunity to visit the Mars District many years ago now, and I was very impressed by all the work that was undergoing there, and I'm sure it's even more impressive today. So I was interested in your opening remarks because there are a lot of incubators that set the focus on startups. So I was interested to know that you're focusing a lot on scale-ups, which of course we refer to as the valley of death. We're really good at startups, as previous witnesses have said, but it kind of all falls apart during the scale-up phase, which produces its own unique challenges. So I was wondering if you could speak to the new Elevate IP program that the federal government has announced and how that will help in this phase and what your experience is with that so far.
So thank you very much for the question. I can't comment. The experience to date with the Elevate IP, since it hasn't been rolled out, so we can't actually comment as to how it's going to work in practice. We're working closely with the recipients of the grant to make sure that we have the pathways to get their great work, as well as the work of the other IP-based organizations that have been funded, into the hands of the entrepreneurs who need them. I think that there's a great incentive for our companies to continue and to be able to fund and continue to fund the development of their IP as they grow. When we look at what Mars does as the work that we're doing now, we do support companies from the zero, kind of they have to be in market, but come from the pre-revenue all the way up to the $100 million mark. And really the reason why we've chosen to work on that pipeline of activity is because that's where we think we get the broader chance of success of them remaining headquartered in Canada and growing. And so when we look at programs like Elevate IP, what we hope to be able to achieve with that is that the companies that are scaling and growing will be able to continue to develop the IP inside while, and if you look at the programs that we provide, we focus heavily on deep, what we call commercialization, which is when we help them with sales, with pricing, with actually, we have a very extensive program on what the reverse side of M&A, teaching our companies how to become acquirers of IP as opposed to selling their IP. So we do that type of work and which we call kind of the dirty sort of scaling commercialization activity that is needed in our companies.
Okay, thank you for that. And what is the role of venture capital in this? And does Mars play a role in helping to access that? I know Communitech in our area of Waterloo does play a role in that. And I just wondered what your feeling is on this and what Mars' role in that is as well.
So venture capital is an essential part of this ecosystem, right? And it's, her comments earlier about the private industry and what role the private players have. venture capital, we don't exist without venture capital. And we know that in our high growth industries, close to 70% of the capital that gets invested in our companies comes from foreign sources. But our companies need capital to grow. And we tend to be, and if you look at what's happening right now, we tend to invest in more capital efficient. We do well in SaaS and in software type companies. Our deep IP and industrial IP and our medical devices and our drug development, that's the area where we don't have as much access to the venture capital as we need. So the role that Mars plays is we're that convener. We run syndicates. We try to bring them. We try to do the introductions. But we also have a capital arm that is third party from the charity in terms of the work that we try to do. But we do actually try to provide that convening capability to match people up with the funding that they need, so that they can compete on the global scale because the market for our customers of our startups and scale-ups that we support are global. So they need to have equal footing in the global market in how they're funded and how they have the risk capital to grow.
Now, it would seem to me if we want to keep these companies in Canada, which we clearly do, because we spend a lot of money growing and nurturing them, that the role of Canadian venture capital would be pivotal. Well, it stands to reason if they get U.S. capital, they might, and they do, flee down to the U.S. What are your thoughts about how we can encourage more Canadian venture capital to take the risk? They're generally risk averse. To take a bet on scaling up these companies. What are your thoughts on that?
Very short answer, please.
The key to all of this is people. You need people who have done it before in the industries that we're looking to support.
Great.
Okay,
thank
well,
you.
that was short. Thank you.
It was short. Thank you, Monsieur Blanchette. Jean-Cap, 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. On va y aller.
Thank you, Chair. In the time that's left, Chair, my question for Ms. Jones. You provided a roadmap, and according to you, in a past witness said that only 7% of intellectual property protected in the national strategy is in the Canadian hands. So that's very much. And I would like to hear from you. How can we better protect our intellectual property, and how can we also increase this intellectual property in Canada?
Thank you very much for that question, because if you look at where the majority of global patents are held, they're held in the largest companies, large global multinationals. And what we don't have in the advanced industries are also in the advanced industries. So if you look at it, so what we don't have in Canada is global multi-foreign nationals in advanced industries that are headquartered here. So for us to actually increase our percentage ownership in global IP, we need to grow big companies. We need to grow domestic big companies and turn them into the acquirers of IP and the destination for where they need to go. So that goes to the whole thesis and the premise why Mars exists, is to be able to help our companies get to that scale and to that capability in terms of what we're looking at. So that sorry,
Parfait, Madame Jones.
Thank you very much. If you could come back to the protection of intellectual property in Canada, are there other things that you could do that could be done compared to other countries do, for example, directives and policies in order to protect our intellectual property in our businesses?
I think we actually have a lot of proposals on the table around what to do to protect our IP. I don't think I have anything net new to add to a lot of the testimony that has already occurred in this committee.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Canning. Can you bring us home, please? 2.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just perhaps give Mr. Lehman another opportunity to expand on. I know you said it was a difficult and complex issue, but this issue of Indigenous knowledge, and you implied that work is being done on some of these questions. If you could just maybe, you were sort of rushed at the end of your last answer there, and just what are the important questions that still need to be answered, and what progress is being made?
Thank you for the question. So I think some of the progress that's being made that we've seen is particularly in regards to using data and turning it into IP for tech, for example, is like local Indigenous governments and regional institutions like the Assembly of First Nations, Chiefs of Ontario, the First Nations Information and Governance Center have really come and put together forward about a lot of policies and principles and practices around Indigenous data and how that is collected and used, and then the next piece is how is it sold. And so I think working with those and understanding the integration of UNDRIP and its principles will also help Indigenous people share their traditional knowledge and work and patents potentially with other parts of Indigenous communities around the world. So, for example, I was able to participate in a trade mission with New Zealand and Australia with the federal government of Canada, and we were able to really do a lot of work with our Indigenous partners and colleagues through that mission on data sovereignty and on IP. And so, encouraging more participation in those international conversations is important because Indigenous people do make up, a large portion of the world, of the land base, and we do have a lot of Commonwealth partners that that are working on this as well.
Just quickly then, are there any stories from New Zealand, Australia, other parts of the world that bear on this that we could learn from?
Yeah, so I think what they've done is they have, just like our First Nation Governance Information Center that we have, and they've created an outline and a framework around how the ownership, possession, and control of Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous data is used. There is different approaches in different parts of the world. And so, for example, in Australia, they just passed, I believe it was called, they did an Indigenous IP initiative. I'm sorry, I don't have it right now, but I will submit it in a brief. And so there is examples of international work that's being done. I'm also able to have been able to participate in working with an organization more in copyright and more in publishing. And there is work being done from a Canadian company that's leading Indigenous innovation in regards to publishing on the world stage as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great use of time, everybody. Tremendous conversations that we've had this morning. It was hard for me not to jump in. I was a co-founder of Innovation Guelph, and I spent 28 years in machine automation space where we did a lot of work on IP. But you guys were fantastic in your questions and your answers. Thank you to the witnesses for the preparation and for the submissions that you'll give us in writing for anything that we didn't quite have enough time to cover. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 27th. There will be a notice of motion coming out. I understand the clerk has a full list of witnesses for us for that meeting already. As I mentioned, next Tuesday, I'd like to have a subcommittee meeting for the first hour so I can get up to speed with the vice chairs and see where we're heading as a committee and get some consensus around that. We've had some discussion today. We don't want to take committee time on that. So, Mr. Jonca Blanchet, thank you for taking some committee time, but that's not fair to you. The second hour, we'll look at the draft report for the International Moon Launch that has been discussed. And I'm looking for agreement to adjourn our meeting. Ça va bien? Okay, merci bien.
Good job, Chair.
Thanks, Charles.